Hello everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on Getting Complaint Right. My name is Janet Anderson, I am the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commissioner, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting wherever you are in Australia, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us for today's conversation. As I said, we're going to be talking about getting complaints right today. And in fact, the focus of today's discussion is a report which was released yesterday called Complaints about Aged Care Home Services, Insight for People Receiving Care. And in fact, if you've not managed to find that report, a link to it is available in the handout section located to the right of your screen. So please check it out. It's also available online at our website. The report aims to help people generally understand what they can expect both from the provider of care, but also the Commission in terms of receiving safe quality care and having a really good experience of that care. This is the first complaints report that we have produced specifically for people receiving aged care, and we're very pleased with it. We're looking forward to receiving feedback on it. It focuses on the experience of those receiving home care packages or using Commonwealth Home Support Program services. And we did that very deliberately because we know that your experiences are different from those in residential aged care. In the discussions today, we'll be talking about people's rights in aged care, what's expected from home services providers, and how the Commission can help. We'll also talk about what happens if things go wrong and don't go the way people want, and how to manage, make, and deal with complaints. Now, while the focus of today's webinar, as I've said, is on home services, there are obviously elements we're going to touch on that apply across all aged care settings. So, as is the case with residential care, home services should provide safe, high-quality care that meets the needs of every single care recipient. We at the Commission use data and insights for complaints to help us understand trends across the sector, which we then share publicly to help providers improve their services by examining their own performance against the sector-wide data. In today's webinar, we'll hear about consumer rights and the benefits of open disclosure, what that looks like, and how it delivers improved experiences for older people. We'll also talk about how people receiving aged care can get help and raise concerns, and the importance of advocacy, including the role of consumer advisory bodies. And finally, we're going to look at the Commission's role in resolving complaints and concerns, how the Older Persons Advocacy Network can help, and we'll also be hearing from a home services provider about how they resolve and learn from complaints. So I'm very pleased to be joined by a panel of experts, and they are Louise Macleod, the Aged Care Complaints Commissioner, Michelle Bampton, an Executive Director in the Commission working on intake and complaints resolution, Craig Gear, who would be well known to many of you as the CEO of the Older Persons Advocacy Network, and also Louise Vera, who is the CEO of an aged care provider, Better Together. And I am particularly pleased to welcome Craig and Louise because they, I know, will provide us with some real life examples to help illustrate some of the points they're making about getting complaints right. Now, our program for this webinar is a little different from our standard format because what I'm going to do is to invite the panelists to participate in a round robin conversation where each of them contributes a component from their own perspective. And then we will be moving to the Q&A session. So before I start, just a few housekeeping matters. You can ask questions at any time. Just use the question box via the live Q&A tab, which hopefully should be visible on your screen. We also have a short survey at the end of the webinar, and I invite you to stay on. It'll pop up of its own accord. Please complete it. We do take very seriously the feedback we receive after each webinar, and we use it not just to select the next topic, but also to improve the way we are delivering information to you and making sure it's of value to you. We are recording today's webinar, and we will publish that recording or the link to it on our website in the next couple of days. Everyone who is registered for today's session will receive a copy of the link so you can check it out or send it to colleagues who've not had the opportunity of watching live. So Let me start by inviting Louise Macleod, the Aged Care Complaints Commissioner, to make some brief opening remarks about what we see from our complaints data and the common issues in home services as set out in our newly published complaints report. Louise, based on the data in the report, I have a particular question. Can you please share some of the key takeaways and common themes about the complaints we received in relation to home services in that 6-month period between July and December last year, 2023?
Thanks, Janet. So what we saw from the complaints that we received, and they're reflected in the report, is that in that period, July to December last year, so over 6 months, we received just over 1,900 complaints about aged care home services. And in that same period, the Commission finalised just over 2,200 complaints, noting some of those complaints were received before the 1st of July, so before that period in the report. And across all the complaints we received in that period, the average time to resolve a complaint was 59 days. And we were able to resolve 65% of the complaints that we had received within 60 days, which means that 35% of complaints took longer than that to resolve. And when complaints take longer than the 60-day period, it's often because they are more complicated, with more issues to work through with the older person and the provider. Now, 66% of complainants who responded to our post-complaint survey said that they were satisfied or very satisfied with the way we handled their complaint. The number one concern raised with the Commission about home care services was the lack of consultation and communication that older people experience from their provider. We also see that people receiving home services who contact us often feel that they're not being involved in the planning of their care, or they're not receiving clear information about how their services are being coordinated. So, for example, who is going to turn up and help them with their cleaning this week? The second most common complaint we receive about home services relate to fees and charges. And the third relate to the management of their finances by the provider. So in terms of identifying who is making complaints to us, in the first instance, we get complaints by the older person, and then closely followed by representatives or family members. So I'll give you it's about 893 from older people and about 838 from representatives or family members. Back to you, Janet.
Okay. Thanks, Louise. That's a really good opening. So around 2,000 complaints about home services in a 6-month period, July, December last year. And you've used some other stats as well, about equally split between those receiving the service and representatives and family members. Okay, that's a useful starting point. So that, of course, is not the full suite of concerns, because there are a proportion, and we don't know the number, that are dealt with very adequately and effectively by the provider. It may be that a home services recipient will raise a point of concern directly with the aged care worker, and they may have a chat, and it may be resolved in that setting. And I know you will share with us your view that that is the ideal circumstance, where somebody feels empowered to raise an issue in the moment and say in a constructive way, look, can we talk about that, because I think there might be a better way of doing it, or that's not working for me. Can we come up with another way through this? Now, if we don't get to see those sorts of conversations, and we really hope that that is something that providers are encouraging their workers to do, to engage in the moment with the care recipient. And of course, so our data is a slice where the complainant has decided for their own reasons, and good on them, to come to the Commission and raise their concerns so that we deal directly with the provider to achieve a resolution to that issue. And it's just important to understand that larger whole. All right, let's move now to some other questions, and we'll move to the panel format, but I'm going to start again with you, Louise, and You're on camera, so why not? Can you please talk us through some of the base documents, the existing legislative provisions that underpin the rights and the expectations that an older person has a right to have of an aged care provider? And I know you're going to talk with us about two documents in particular. The first is the Charter of Aged Care Rights, and the second are the Aged Care Quality Standards. Can you take us into that field, please?
Yeah, thanks, Janet. Look, Janet's touched on two key underpinnings of how we look at complaints and look at how a provider has dealt with complaints that they receive about the services they're providing. So under the current Aged Care Act, we've got the Aged Care Quality Standards and the Charter of Aged Care Rights. And both of those set expectations for people receiving care and for their providers about the quality and safety of aged care. And the Charter of Aged Care Rights in particular set out 14 rights of everyone receiving government subsidised aged care services. So to take you through those rights, the law says that every person receiving aged care has the right to safe and high quality care and services, be treated with dignity and respect, have their identity, culture and diversity valued and supported, live without abuse and neglect, be informed about their care and the services in the way they understand, be able to access all information about themselves, including information about their rights, their care and the services they receive, have control over and make choices about their care and their personal and social life, including where those choices might involve personal risk, have control over and make decisions about the personal aspects of their daily life, their financial affairs, their possessions, also have the right to their own independence, be listened and understood, have a person of their choice, including an aged care advocate or support person, be able to speak for them and support them, complain free from reprisal and have their complaints dealt with fairly and promptly, have the right to their own personal privacy and have their personal information protected, and last but not least, exercise these rights without it adversely affecting the way they're treated. And we expect aged care providers to apply the Charter by upholding these rights. And people who are receiving care, it's also important that you understand that you have those rights, and providers must help you to ensure that you are aware of them. They can give you a copy of the Charter when you start receiving aged care, and you can ask for a copy of the Charter at any point. The provider is required to sign the Charter and ask whether the person receiving care would like to sign it. But remember, the person receiving care can exercise their choice. They don't have to sign the Charter if they don't want to, but it's a handy thing to have. The Charter is also available in multiple languages, and it applies regardless of the type of care or service being delivered. And the Charter, combined with the quality care standards, and there are 8 of them, make it easy to understand what quality care looks like. So the quality care standards set out how the care and services a provider delivers must be safe, high quality, and meet the needs and preferences of people receiving that care. And Australian government-funded aged care providers must show that they meet the quality standards, and they can demonstrate this in a variety of ways, depending on how big or small they are and how they've got their service set up. So those quality standards cover a range of important aspects of care that providers must comply with. And as I said, there are 8 of them. So they cover consumer dignity and choice, assessment and planning, personal care and clinical care, the services and supports for daily living, the service environment, feedback and complaints, the human resources of the provider, and the provider's organisational governance. And each quality standard includes the outcomes that people should expect, the expectations that providers must meet, and how they can do that, the requirements that they can demonstrate. And I think most importantly, the standards also make it clear that providers must work in partnership with the people receiving their services, and that those services meet the individual's needs and preferences. I'd encourage you to have a look at the report because it sets out the rights and the quality standards in more detail to help you understand, if you're an older person, the types, the rights that you enjoy, and also the quality standards, and for a provider to know what to expect. Back to you, Janet.
Okay, thank you, Louise. A lot of content there, but as you say, it's presented really accessibly in the report that we've just published. So definitely commend that for people's reading. The other comment I'd make at this point before going to the next panel member is a reflection on how we are moving into a period of additional reform, which will ultimately result in a new Aged Care Act. And I'm sure there are a lot of people watching this webinar who are familiar with that and are very eagerly awaiting the new Aged Care Act. The government has clarified that they are working very hard to introduce the bill as soon as possible to Parliament, but then it will need to find its own way through the debate processes in both chambers of Parliament and then ultimately be passed for implementation. And the expectation is that that will take some time. So we have a situation where there is an existing charter and we have existing quality standards. And what Louise has just set out for all of us is those existing provisions. And they won't be changing until such time as we have a new Aged Care Act, which is passed by Parliament. So that's why we have doubled down on the existing provisions, because they still apply and they are very relevant, whether you are a provider of services or someone who is receiving aged care services or a family member supporting a person receiving aged care services. It's important for you to understand the existing provisions, even as you anticipate that there will be new provisions that we will brief you on at the right time when the new Aged Care Act comes into place. All right, that was by way of footnote. Now, let me move on. I'm going to bring Michelle Bampton into the conversation. As I said earlier, she's an Executive Director, Intake and Complaints Resolution in the Commission. Michelle, question for you. Providers should practice open disclosure when handling feedback and complaints. And this, in fact, is an expectation in the quality standards. So could you please set out your best understanding of what that means, practicing open disclosure, and particularly what the benefits are for people receiving care as well as for providers?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Janet. Open disclosure starts with really a provider being proactive and really looking to ask people in their care if everything's okay, not waiting for people to complain or raise concerns, but taking that proactive approach. And providers are required under Standard 6 of the quality standards to establish a system for handling complaints. And I guess some tips, I suppose, on good practice around that is things like having a dedicated complaints officer to hear complaints, having a good complaint handling policy in place, ensuring staff are well trained, particularly in areas like active listening and asking open questions so that they can get a genuine connection going with the person that they're caring for and really listening to what it is that they're saying. And another good feature of a complaints process is really around promoting advocacy services where people might need support to be able to make a complaint. But also under Standard 6, providers are required to practice open disclosure, as you mentioned. And this really involves using a collaborative approach with complainants through open communication and transparency. So the key aspects of practicing open disclosure are really around, firstly, minimising the impact of the problem on the care recipient, communicating with that individual early, and I can't stress enough how timely communication is really important in the open disclosure process. So acknowledging the problem, providing an honest explanation about what's happened and why it's happened, apologising, actively listening to the person's experience of what's happened and giving them an opportunity to really feel heard. Taking action to fix the problem and preventing it from happening again is obviously a really important part of any complaints resolution process, and open disclosure certainly covers that. And explaining the actions that have been taken and in a way that reassures them that this isn't going to happen again to somebody else. Because we do hear that a lot from complainants, that they're really keen to make sure that this doesn't happen to someone else. And when open disclosure is done well, it can benefit everyone involved. So it helps build collaboration and trust between the provider and the care recipient, and often the family as well. It can really become a cultural and behavioural cornerstone of that continuous learning and service improvement. So people make a complaint, the service improves, the provider explains that to the complainant, and everybody benefits from that service improvement and the trust that comes with that. And it really can enhance the public trust and confidence in aged care in general through people understanding the transparency that's involved in this process. So to help providers and also to help consumers, if there are people on the line who'd like to check it out, we've got an open disclosure framework and guidance resource on our website. And we've also got better practice guidelines for complaints handling for further information and quite detailed guidance for providers there as well. Thanks, Janet. Back to you.
Okay, so the term might scare some people off. It sounds a bit technical, it sounds complicated, but what you've done is unpack it in a really practical way. This is not rocket science, but it makes an enormous difference because it is the workers engaging directly with the individual who has the concern or complaint and having a discussion about what didn't go according to plan and what needs to be done better. So it is very much designed with the remedy in mind. But let's anchor this in the practical. I'm going to bring Louise in here. Louise, it's great to have you on the panel. Thank you so much for agreeing to participate. Just by way of context, can you give us a sentence or two on what your service looks like, where you operate, how big you are, what sort of services you provide, and how many people you provide it to?
Thank you for having me, Janet. So I'm really proud to be the CEO of Better Together Community Support, and we're a smallish not-for-profit that is located on the beautiful Atherton Tablelands in far north Queensland. We take a sort of whole-of-life approach to meeting our community needs, and so we have 16 programs that run alongside our Commonwealth Home Support Program. So everything from families and child programs right through to youth, adult, and then our aged care services. We have 1,200 active clients approximately over a 12-month period in our CHSP program, and we provide services in allied health, social work, psychological services, maintenance and modifications, and we're also working in partnership in the Care Finder program as well, hosting that.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. That's a really nice word picture of what you do. All right, so we've situated you in Queensland doing that in really important work in the local community. I understand that your service does practice open disclosure. So what we're interested in hearing from you is how your senior leadership team and your workplace culture contributes to enabling the practice of open disclosure and ensuring that you're delivering the best possible outcomes for the people to whom you're providing care.
So continuous improvement and a focus on best practice development in our staff is crucial to having that workplace culture that allows us to provide high quality services across all our programs. So we're really lucky in as much as we've had many years of embedding really strong continuous improvement and quality processes across all our programs. And right from the board level, through the leadership team and down onto the on the ground staff, that no blame culture is really strong in our organisation, and I feel like that directly impacts both our staff satisfaction and also the satisfaction of our clients when they access our service. I guess we're really keen on our organisational values around walking the talk of those values. And so being transparent in our processes, including our complaints processes, and being accountable when we run into a problem, or when a client brings us a problem, we're owning that and we're working with them to nut that out and to make it better in the future through our quality and continuous improvement. I guess from our perspective, our staff really appreciate that sort of culture here at Better Together. So when we go out to staff for the biannual satisfaction surveys, we're having a 75% engagement rate in the survey, so which is a success in itself. And then within that, we've got about 94% satisfaction rate across the board with our staff. And so they feel empowered to provide great services to our clients, and they feel safe that when they're encountering barriers to providing that wonderful service, that they've got avenues where they can ask for something to be improved, or something to be like a barrier to be removed, so they can actually provide that service. And so we really try to encourage, and we do get a really good engagement rate in our quality committee, and also all the work that sits behind our quality committee. Yeah. We actually just had a brilliant piece of feedback from one of our staff in the last round of staff satisfaction, and she or he said that Better Together practices what we preach even behind closed doors, which means a lot. And out of all the feedback we got out of that survey, that was my favourite one, because that lets me know that our values are actually a real lived experience for our staff, but also for our clients.
That's the absolute test, isn't it? That you are the same when no one's watching. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. You've given a really interesting and insightful answer that I think providers and consumers who are watching can take a lot from. Let me move the discussion on. We're going to move now to a focus on the people receiving care, and if you're listening, how you can get help and also raise concerns or provide feedback about your services. Louise, again, going to you. So can you please sketch out for us the options available to people to raise concerns and to speak with someone if their rights aren't being met or if their services are not meeting their needs?
Yeah, sure. So remember, everyone, in the Charter of Rights, there is a right there for people who are receiving care to be able to safely make a complaint. And it is okay to raise concerns or make a complaint about aged care services. So if something isn't right or it doesn't seem right, I strongly encourage people to speak up and raise their concerns. You're not being difficult by raising concerns. It's a normal and important part of ensuring that the services being provided are meeting the needs of people receiving care. And good complaints handling focuses on the people receiving care at all times. Now, there are many people available to speak with if someone has any concerns about aged care services. And often, from our experience, the quickest and easiest way to get concerns resolved is actually speaking directly with the provider in the first instance, a staff member or their manager, if you feel comfortable doing that. Now, if the person receiving care does not feel heard or finds that their provider is being unhelpful, or they don't feel comfortable speaking about their concerns with the provider, then they can raise their concerns with the Commission. And they can do this at any time. They certainly do not have to exhaust all other options before they come to us. Anyone can come to the Commission and give feedback or raise concerns at any time. This includes people receiving care, family, friends, workers, volunteers. People can also choose to make confidential or anonymous complaints to us. And to do that, you can contact us by phone on 1800 951 822 or by email at info@agedcarequality.gov.au, online via our website at agedcarequality.gov.au, or even by writing us a letter at Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission, GPO Box 9819 in your capital city. People can also speak with an advocate. For example, the Older Persons Advocacy Network that Craig is the CEO of. And they can help people receiving care to talk with their provider. It's a free and independent and confidential support service. And I'm sure Craig is going to share more about how OPAN can help us and help people who have concerns about their care shortly. Thanks, Janet.
Absolutely. I'm going to come to Craig next, but just before I do, I'm going to sneak in Laurie again. Laurie, just very briefly, can you sketch for us the pathways in place for people receiving your care from your service to raise concerns and how you support them in doing that? And I think you've already touched on this in the earlier comments you made, but is there anything further you want to add?
I wanted to stress that we have a complaints process that is followed, but I think a lot of the time our CHSP clients feel like they don't want to, bother. They don't want to get people in trouble and all of that sort of stuff. And so what we try to do, our client intake, I must admit, they are amazing, that team, and they spend a lot of time talking with people about our services and how they experience them. And one of the things that we capture in our client management system is positive and negative impacts, what we call positive and negative impacts against each program. So it might not meet the threshold for an official complaint, but we capture where someone's unhappy with us. And they might say, oh, no, I don't want to make a complaint. But we still capture that detail around what it is that has disconcerted them or made them uncomfortable or not happy with our service. It's really important to capture that lower level feedback as well, because you often get to nip things in the bud early that way, rather than waiting for a stream of complaints to come in. We also have feedback forms that every time we provide a service for someone, we offer them the opportunity to provide feedback, and that feedback gets collated and goes to the board every month. And let me tell you, my board want to know if there's an unsatisfactory feedback. They want to know, and they hold me very accountable for that. So yeah, it goes straight into our risk matrix and it travels from there. So I think it's important to have a really strong complaints process, but it's also really important to listen to those other avenues of clients having a voice in your service.
And you've set out really well the fact that all your staff work within this culture so that they are actively listening, so that there's no wrong door. A consumer who expresses a concern about some aspect of their care can raise that with the person who's delivering that service or with anyone else. And you've basically privileged that voice to ensure that people are paying close attention and responding to that need, which is brilliant. And you've engineered it in. I don't pretend that it's an easy thing you've done, but it clearly is lifting the experience for every single person receiving care from your service. That's great. Thank you, Laurie. All right, Craig, your turn. So we've had a couple of mentions of advocates, and that's your cue to tell us about OPAN and how it can help people receiving care, and as well as their family and friends and other supporters who may have concerns about home services.
Yeah, so I mean, what Louise talked about there is really important. I mean, providers shouldn't be scared of getting feedback and complaints. It is the window to the soul of your organisation. It's the way that you improve. It's the way that we make sure that we're responsive. I mean, we do hear a lot of feedback from people around communication, and that's key to what Louise talking about there. But not everyone feels confident enough right at that time, or they want to check out what the rights are. Is the provider, can they do this? Is often what we hear. And so what our advocates do, and they're free, confidential, and independent of the Commission, government, and of the providers as well. So they're on the older person's side. So that's really important, to empower older people to have their voice. And that's what our advocates do. It's about people being able to express their wishes and preferences. And it's about them having the confidence to be able to say, it's not going quite right, or you haven't quite heard me, or you're not delivering the care that I'm looking for in the way I want it delivered in line with my priorities. So our advocates kind of walk alongside an older person to make sure that their voice is being heard, to understand their services, to understand their rights, understand the Charter of Aged Care Rights. We see ourselves very much as the custodians of the Charter, because it is a shield for older people, but it's also a bit of a sword as well to come to providers and go, yep, come on, let's do better here. And that's why it's a really powerful tool for people to really understand, but not to be afraid of as well. So Right 11 does talk about that right to an aged care advocate as well. For people, we can also work with the provider as well, because particularly with home care and home support and home care packages, it's the provider who's really having that regular relationship. And so them saying, hey, did you know that there's this service available as well? And so you can come to us directly, but you can also reach out and get these free supports as well. It's 1-800-700-600, which is our aged care advocate line. Gets people through to our 9 members in the states and territories, but it's a really important service. We also have a self-advocacy toolkit, because knowledge is power. And when people can do it for themselves, it really means that continued positive relationship with the provider upholding rights, with older people understanding their rights as well, it really works well.
Oh, thank you, Craig. Going back to your very opening comment, providers shouldn't be scared of complaints. A good complaint is a window into where you can improve. And as Marie has demonstrated, paying active attention to that sort of input allows your service to shine and to receive the sorts of satisfaction ratings that Marie is quoting for us. All right, Michelle. Now, another important pathway which is now available to people receiving home services to register their concerns, but also to provide feedback to the provider, which may be positive or constructively pointing them in the direction of improvement, is the Consumer Advisory Body. Now, can you set out briefly for us what that means?
Yeah, thanks, Janet. This is another important pathway, because it doesn't depend on someone feeling like they have to make a complaint. This is a way people can speak up before they've got a complaint, as Louise said, really important. So from last year, December 2023, all approved providers, aged care providers who get government funding, were required to set up a consumer advisory body for people in their care, or at least offer to set one up, and they need to make that offer to people at least every 12 months. If people don't want to set one up now, maybe they want to do that later on. So consumer advisory bodies are an opportunity for people who are receiving care to provide feedback to providers and the governing bodies around the quality of care and the services that they receive. So they really help build that person-centred culture and commitment to quality within a service. And the first step for a provider in setting up a consumer advisory body is to write to all the people in their care and offer to set up the consumer advisory body. And that can be by email or a letter or a poster or pamphlets, but as long as everyone's advised that they're invited to join in to the consumer advisory body. And then it's important to note that the body's made up of people receiving care. It doesn't include staff or management. So it's a body for the people receiving care to have a say. Providers need to make a way for the body to meet that's comfortable and accessible for everyone, even if they've got some kind of visual or hearing or cognitive impairment. And they also the meetings need to be held at a time when everyone can attend. And so one of the important things around the consumer advisory bodies is that they need to agree on how the provider will feed back to the body around the processes that they've taken in response to the feedback that's been provided to them. So there's that feedback loop to the consumer advisory body itself. Now, we've just recently published a great new resource around consumer advisory bodies. So that's our consumer advisory body meeting discussion guide. And that's a really good one for both consumers and providers to get hold of to help guide the discussions that consumer advisory bodies might want to have. It's probably all I need to say for now about those, Janet, but hopefully people online can get involved. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. All right, that's really useful. And as Michelle said, there's a lot more to be learned, but hopefully some of you, of providers online, have already accumulating experiences of the consumer advisory body. And I will come to Craig in just a moment to invite him to share with us some of the early learnings, because undoubtedly OPAN has received comments and sought input from a range of older people and their families about how it's going so far. But just before I do, a couple of things. First of all, don't forget that you're able to submit questions, and please take advantage of that facility. The other point I'd make is I understand some people, not many, but some may have experienced difficulties in accessing the webinar at the start. And I just want to remind everyone that we are recording this webinar and will provide a link to it so that everyone who's registered can certainly watch it again as soon as we get the link out to you. So moving on, Craig, what has OPAN heard about the early experiences of setting up and operating consumer advisory bodies? How's it going, and do you know?
Yeah, so I've heard some really powerful stories about how this is impacting care for the older person, but also about how providers are able to deliver their services, because it's often that you don't know what you don't know. You think things are going well. This is a really great way to get that ongoing input to say, hey, what's the experience really like out there on the ground? How are we going with communication? How are we going with giving you choice and control around your workers and how care is delivered? How are we going about upholding your rights? The things that people have said to us that really works well is if you keep communicating to people about the offer being open, if people do decline, to say sometimes about why they're declining. So to think about, it might be about how you're structuring, it might be the supports that someone needs on there. People have also said, you need to tell me a bit about what's involved and how much work's going to be and how you really are going to listen to me. If I'm going to give my expertise and as an older person experiencing your service, how are you going to credibly listen to me? And like Michelle said, how are you going to feed that back and tell me that your board has listened to me and how you're doing it? There'll be some times I think providers may not be able to act on everything that's suggested, but as long as you can feed that back to people and say, we listened to you, we took this under serious consideration, this is what we can do, these are the reasons why we can't do everything, but keep talking to us. I think that's what we've heard so far. Okay.
All right, really useful. So, coming to Michelle, and this is the final part of our conversation, the Commission's complaints process. We've heard from Craig aspects of the consumer advisory body, expectations on providers. Louise talked to us about what she does in her neck of the woods. What is the Commission's role here? What do we do? And can you just step us briefly through the way in which the Commission gets involved and how we help, please?
Absolutely. So when a person contacts us, we listen and ask questions about the complaint. And we're really looking to understand the issues that the person is raising and the outcome that they're looking for. And then we'll explain to them what we can do and how we can help. If we can't help, and there are some issues that are outside our remit, we'll explain why, and we'll also help them to access service that can help them. And where we can help, which is the majority of cases, our complaints officers will work with the person making the complaint or their representative, if that's appropriate, and the provider to find a solution to the problem. We might also speak to professionals about the clinical or technical issues involved in the complaint, and we'll certainly be talking to the complainant and the service provider to gather all the relevant information. We'll help the complainant understand what they can and can't expect from the provider, and then we'll also help the provider work through a plan of what they can do to help resolve the complaint. Our complaints officers will assess the provider's response and make sure that they're working to fix the issue. and that the services are meeting the required standards, which we've heard about earlier today. We'll also monitor the progress with that and make sure that providers continue to meet the standards and comply with the law outside of the complaints process. And that's part of our role as the broader commission to make sure that those providers continue to meet the standards. As things progress, we'll follow up and check in with the complainant or their representative and make sure that the providers fix the issues. And if we need to, we can take further action under the law to make sure providers improve the quality of their services and that they meet their responsibilities under the Aged Care Act. So when a complaint's raised with us, there's a number of possible outcomes that can be achieved. And this really depends on what the complainant's looking for. We'll try and tailor the outcomes that we get to what the person's seeking. But often they include things like an apology or a change in the provider's practice or process, better training for staff, perhaps providing a clearer understanding of fees or even reimbursement of fees where they've been charged incorrectly, or even things like a better explanation of what services can and can't be provided. And in some cases, when a complaint's raised, we can't take any further action. This doesn't happen often, but it does happen, especially when we might have got a complaint that might be anonymous, for example, and there's not enough information for us to be able to do too much with it, or where there's an issue that's not ongoing, or there's no outcome that can be achieved through the resolution process. But in all cases, complaints provide the Commission with important intelligence and information. They help us to understand the bigger picture about what the provider is and isn't doing, and helps inform the broader regulatory actions that we take across the whole of the Commission. And we also welcome feedback about our complaints process, and that feedback helps us improve our service and uphold the quality of the care recipients' services and their rights to safe and quality care. Thanks, Janet.
All right, Michelle, I'm just going to take a couple of questions and insert them here because you are the best person to answer them. John has raised the point that it sounds like we're talking generically about people receiving aged care rather than focusing on the individual. Do your complaints officers focus on the individual?
Yeah, look, Janet, the reality of managing complaints is that we've got a person on the end of the phone who is quite often distressed. And so we're very much about listening to them and working with them to achieve what they want to achieve. So we talk in generic terms in webinars like this, but actually on the ground, it plays out person to person. And we get the most beautiful feedback sometimes from individuals who have really welcomed that individualised approach that we provide. So we love to hear that, and we pride ourselves on taking that kind of approach.
Thank you. All right, Craig, I'm bringing you back in. Can you just give a single example which illustrates the role that OPAN can play so effectively in assisting people to get their issues resolved with a particular provider?
Sure, I'm going to do two really quickly. One's a home care provider, and that's about, we saw 37,000 cases of information support and advocacy cases last year. 58% of those were from home care, about home care packages. We had someone who had been overcharged $7K. We were working with the Commission on this as well, so this was a joint sort of working together. It took quite a bit, but in negotiating and actually understanding that, and our financial advocacy officers unpacking that invoicing, and that overcharge got paid back, and the provider agreed that they had overcharged and paid that person back on the work of the advocate. Older person was really happy with that. Home support, Commonwealth Home Support, that's about 18% of the work we do, and that's really about communication. Really lovely case where the provider didn't know the communication wasn't going so well. They kept saying, and the person had called them, and they said, no, it's all fine. We had to keep going back to the provider a few times. After that, the light bulb moment went on and went, oh, okay, yes, we have had some staff shortages. You're right, we're going to do better. We're going to orientate our staff to the importance of communication and keeping in contact with you. Checked in with the older person a few weeks later, and they said it's just 100% better. So that's where an advocate can work with the provider as well, and work with the older person to just make sure it's a really great outcome. Because again, you don't know what you don't know sometimes, and you need those eyes and ears out there.
That's so true. Well done. Thank you for that. Just going to another question or a comment. Gwenda Darling. Hello, Gwenda. Gwenda's asked, when are we going to stop using the word consumers? Participants are not consumers. She's absolutely right. And we're doing our best, but we need to be reminded from time to time. So thank you, Ms. Darling. Appreciate the feedback. All right, I'm going to go to Louise. Louise, you get the final comment before we open the floor to questions. And I'm going to ask you the same sort of question or put the same request to you. Can you give us an example of a complaint where somebody to whom you've provided care has raised a concern with you, which you've resolved internally, and what happened as a result of that?
Thanks, Janet. So the complaint that I think best sums up our process, both engaging the individual, but then using that information to make our service better, is a complaint we had a couple of years ago from a CHSP client referred into our psychological services. So our process was that, so we were running at that time a significant wait list. So the wait list comes about when we have an increased demand, and of course our funding is levels are set for many years. So we have an increased demand and not enough psychs to meet the demand. And so this person approached the client intake team to say they hadn't heard that they hadn't been contacted about being on the wait list. They were quite distressed about being on the wait list and not having anyone contact them. And so the complaint went through the process of the coordinator of the psychs phoned the person and reassured them and heard what they were saying and explained our waitlist process, and then was able to facilitate a rapid appointment for the person, because it was assessed that that person's mental health had deteriorated whilst she was on the wait list. So that's kind of the individual level. But at that time, we noticed that there was a significant amount of complaints coming around our waitlist management. And so the waitlist management as a whole for our psych services team went into our quality process. And as a result of that, we did some really good research around best practice models for intake, triage, and brief intervention. And we rejigged our intake process so that everybody on our wait list was seeing a triage mental health social worker as a triage first appointment. So they had a person face-to-face that they could talk to. We did some simple assessments, and we made sure that the people who needed us the most got us the quickest, which we weren't doing in the past. And so that complaint and all the other people who complained at that time set up a mechanism for us to go, right, that's it. We've got to do something about where there's no 5 psychs coming in on white horses to rescue us. We have to manage our wait list much more effectively. And because of that person having enough care about the service and enough gumption to make that complaint, it made a really important sweeping change in the way we provide services.
All right, thank you very much. To another powerful example of the way you can harness a complaint to achieve service improvement and better outcomes for those receiving care. Wonderful, thank you, Marie. All right, we have lots of questions. We're not going to be able to get through them all, but I'm going to do my best. So I'm going to ask the panelists to keep your answers short if you can, so that I can move through some of these at speed. Michelle, to you first. There's a question about whether there are set timeframes applying to the Commission in terms of managing a complaint. Do you want to take that one briefly?
Yeah, we have some timeframes that apply to us in a policy sense at the moment. And we are looking at the possibility of building some of those into the legislation as we go forwards as well. So if anyone's got any queries about that, feel free to contact us and we can explain further.
Okay. Staying with you, Michelle, Sue has indicated that she has a concern, which I'm sure might be shared by some others. Reprisals are a reality, unfortunately, and if someone was to complain to the Commission about reprisals, they risk having their contract rescinded. So basically it's what sort of protections are available that the Commission can offer so that we are genuinely encouraging people to approach us and not be fearful that there will be repercussions.
Yeah, it's something we take really seriously, Janet. Obviously, we highly value complaints, as Louise explained. And if we think that someone is punishing someone for complaining, then we would take a very swift and dim view of that behaviour. We have a number of law protections at our disposal in the Commission to be able to take action against providers where required, and we wouldn't hesitate to deploy them in that case. Certainly, if anyone's got concerns about that particular aspect, raise it with our complaints officers when you talk to them, and we can be extra vigilant and actively addressing that with the provider if that's what's required, even proactively in advance if that's something that we would need to do.
Okay. Louise, one for you. There's been a lot of discussion in recent times about restorative justice, restorative pathways, and we're going to have a more complete discussion about that, I expect, in the context of the new Act. But just for now, do you see elements of that in our current practice in the Commission? Is that something that we give a thought and attention to in the way we go about assisting a complainant to achieve the outcome they're looking for?
Yeah, Janet, great question. Look, restorative engagement at its sort of most fundamental is all of those things around actively listening, demonstrating empathy, showing the person attention and respect, and helping them work and set them up to work with a provider to share their experience. And from that, the provider then working with them to identify how can we fix this, working together, taking action on that and feeding that back into their quality and continuous improvement. So having that sort of loop of continuous improvement going on. And it's that acknowledgement of the fact that something has gone wrong for the person and being heard and understood, and the empathy and attention and respect that is played, that is, yeah, as I said, fundamental to restorative engagement and is something we do already in our complaints handling. And we're going to continue working and building on that with other maybe formal opportunities under the new Act.
Okay, good answer. Thank you. All right, I'm going to ask for a closing comment from Louise and then one from Craig. Louise, the question to you is, you have a new member of staff in your office and you're welcoming them and encouraging them to enjoy being a new employee. What do you say to them about the way in which they should deal with a recipient, a care recipient who's unhappy? In a couple of sentences.
Thanks, Janet. So I guess that sort of messaging to new staff starts right at induction, and in fact should start at interview stage, where you're really upfront about what sort of culture you're trying to provide and making sure that the people who you're shortlisting and recruiting actually agree with that culture. But I guess what we really need to understand is linking our client feedback and client complaints to directly linking it to the quality of our service in the minds of the people that work for us. So, and that is absolutely key to, if people understand the link, it's not about them getting in trouble. It's not about a client with unrealistic expectations. It's about us knowing exactly what we need to do to continuously improve the service that we provide.
Well done. You rose to the challenge magnificently.
Thank you, Janet.
All right, Craig, you get the final word. OPAN has a vital role to play as somebody who's in the consumer or complainants court, and you get very good feedback in terms of the work you do on that. Can you just talk about the way in which you link in with the Commission so that it is in fact seamless and you don't step into our role and we choose not to step into yours, so that we can actually to provide that support layer depending on what works best for the consumer.
Yeah, so it is about the choice for the person. We will sort of work with them to actually decide where they want their complaint. Obviously, the powers of the Commission are really important. We want those powers strengthened in the new Act. We want the Statement of Rights strengthened in the new Act. It's the pathway for us to continue to improve. But we can go and do the talk straight with provider at the direction of the older person, the participant. So that's really important for us to do. We will work, we will have a lead and sometimes hand over to the Commission for them to lead that case forward. So for providers, pick up the phone, get us involved, 1-800 700 600. Same with older people, families and participants, give us a call. We can help you through. And then if you do want to go through those other process with the Commission, we can help you with that as well. And we're very clear of the different roles and functions. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. And many thanks to my panelists, but also to the many of you who submitted questions. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to more of them, but I do hope that you have gained something from this hour we've spent with you. A reminder, please, to go and look at the complaints report that we've just published, because it will assist you, whatever your prospective provider, care recipient, family member. It's one of a sequence, and there will be more to come. I do hope you also stay online for the survey, which will pop up immediately when we finish. The takeaway message, and thematically what has joined every panel participant, is that complaint should be understood as an opportunity, not a threat, not a risk, not a problem, but an opportunity. Embrace them, work with the person who is sharing that concern with you, and deliver better care. Everyone is a beneficiary. Those surrounding that individual, your service, your workers, your reputation, all benefit from an energetic and focused engagement with the concerns which are raised with you. Well done, and thank you to Laurie, Craig, Louise and Michelle. Great discussion and a lot of food for thought going away. Thank you everyone for your participation, and we look forward to engaging with you next time. Take care everyone, bye-bye.